Welcome to Krome Cast. Check it out. I'm Sam Major, Commercial Director of Krome Technologies. I'm joined once again by Ben Randall, Technical Director and in-house Palo Alto expert.
Thanks for having me, Sam.
No problem. We'll draw attention to the very small blue elephant in the room that's making some noise, which we can probably pick up on the microphones, but not as bad as the Dell Power Store that we had,
indeed.
which I still think I'm suffering somewhat for. But we have today Palo Alto 820 firewall.
Yes, it's Palo Alto Networks PA820.
Fantastic. It does actually say it on the back, so I should have found that easier.
Yes.
But obviously, Palo Alto has been our firewall of choice for 10 years, I would say,
Yes.
at least. Obviously,
More
a
than
big fan of their technology, given that, well, in our opinion, best firewalls out there, but first to market with kind of layer 7 deep packet inspection, changing the way, I guess, firewalls worked,
Yes.
and really upping the kind of security game. This obviously an 820. There are newer models available.
Yes.
It'd be good if you give me, I guess, the differences. I know we can see the front on camera, and we'll probably do a bit of a closer shot later. But if we run through the 820 we have here and the newer ones in the range.
Yeah, sure. The 800 series are intended for sort of branch, small, medium offices. This is an 820, which is the lower spec of the two, actually. There's an 850, which the main difference between that and this is that the 850 has redundant power supplies, hot swappable in the back, and it has the same arrangement of ports on the front, but 4 of them are dual personality 10 or 1 gig, whereas this unit
is just 1 gig.
Is all 1 gig. Yes.
Okay.
Fundamentally, the difference between the various models, apart from number of ports and things like that, is really fundamentally is throughput. So you go down to the bottom of the range, the PA400s and the 220s, they're lower performance. They go up through the 800 series, the 3200 series, and you basically get the same user interference. User
interference is exactly why we have firewalls.
Yes, absolutely. You get the same user interface and features, but you get greater performance.
It's just I guess the bandwidth that we need, the size of the office throughput, etc., etc.
Absolutely.
So going up to, and we talked very briefly, but the 7000 series will be kind of big data center class.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're talking like a bank or something like that. It's a very high throughput device.
Indeed. We're just talking about the feature set though. So exactly the same from the 220 to the 7000 series and so on. Same subscriptions, same level of protection.
Yes, basically yes. The obviously the throughput is different, but the actual subscriptions, you can buy the same subscriptions for all the models on the way up, and so you get things like the threat, most basic level support, threat prevention. Then you go into things like WildFire, which we can touch on a little bit later on the detail of exactly what these mean, SD-WAN and so on. So there's a lot there.
There is a lot there, and I think it'd be really good to get into things like WildFire and the use of that. I think it's a very impressive piece of technology. Panorama, something obviously we use to manage clients' firewalls and people with larger estates have to use.
Absolutely.
And like you say, SD-WAN config, all that sort of good stuff, but it's probably a good idea if we can get into some of the, I guess, the actual look and feel of the interface.
Absolutely.
It's good for our audience to actually see what does Palo Alto look like. Now, no, we're going to jump into, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but it's OS 9.1.
That's correct, yes. We've got obviously this is an unconfigured firewall. There's not a lot to look at apart from the basic interface.
And some lights in the front.
Yeah, it's got some lights on the front, yeah. So we've got a running machine, so we've got some actual traffic through it. You can really get a look at what there is there. And I'm going to show you what I feel has always been the thing that Palo Alto has delivered over and above the next-gen firewall thing. You've got the nice user interface, the ability to look into the logs and so on. So we can demonstrate that.
Great, let's jump into that.
Yeah.
Here's what I prepared earlier.
Yeah, here's what exactly.
So Ben, obviously this is the homepage, the dashboard. Do you want to talk us through what we're looking at here?
Yeah, sure. When you first log in, this is the dashboard. Shows some general information about the firewall. So you can see its name, its management IP address, other information like the serial number, the current state of the updates on it, the system resources, as well as high availability information and the latest system log entries, and who happens to be logged into the firewall.
So who's been logged in and who is logged in?
Well, who is actually currently logged in at the moment, and we can see our Panorama and myself, for example. So,
but I'm assuming it'll also skip logs of who has been in, so you know who's made changes and all that sort of stuff.
Absolutely. There's also configuration logs, so we can go into all those logs later. It's quite comprehensive.
Yep.
So certainly from a tech point of view, I thought it'd make sense to kind of show the highlights of this rather than a detailed step-by-step. So we can show some of the areas where people may do a lot of their work, if you see what I mean. So
makes sense.
first of all, go to the network and we can see the actual physical interfaces and the virtual sub-interfaces, which are VLAN tagged interfaces below an actual physical port. So, for example, here you can see that the VLAN tags on there, the security zone applied to it, and the IP address. This is fairly straightforward and quite obvious, really. You click on the link, and you can open it. You can see the various settings, including the IP address and so on. Additionally, we can see VPN tunnel interfaces. So these are the virtual interfaces that actually relate to the IPsec tunnels, which go to other sites. And here you can see the status of various tunnels, some being up and others down at the moment on this machine. Then with regard to routing, you can have multiple virtual routers within the firewall. So you have interfaces applied to routers and static routes or dynamic routing, BGP, OSPF, and so on, configured in there, as you can see in the tabs here. Then moving on, really the most important thing, the main original USP of the Palo Alto Networks Firewall, next gen firewall, I should say, was the application ID. So it's not just a port base; it's working at layer 7. So we've got the ability. You've got quite a comprehensive database here of types of network traffic. So, for example, I mean, this is where you can literally look up anything. So I put in FTP and search for that. I should find down here FTP, amongst other things. We have F and T and P in them. We can see the standard ports it uses, TCP port 21, and it's a short description of what FTP is and the kind of what it's used for and the level of risk associated with it. Similarly, you can go on a more advanced level, so we could look for Facebook. So if I do a search for Facebook, as you can see, there's not just Facebook. We've got Facebook games, Facebook file sharing, and so on. And so we can literally click on one of those, and you can see the standard ports that would use, as well as a description of what that is. So that gives us the granularity to actually examine traffic and say, okay, we'll let our users view Facebook, but we don't want them playing Facebook games. So we can actually, if we set up SSL decryption, because this will all take place over SSL, then the firewall can see what that traffic is, and we actually block access to those things we don't want. We give that level of granular in what we can do. Level of granularity, even though they're all using TCP port 80 and 443.
Compare that to before we went next gen. Everything's kind of port based. That'd have been binary, so it'd have been open or closed. We would have Facebook or not, right? But now we can actually have elements of.
Well, to be honest, even beyond that, I mean, unless you had some kind of URL filtering, literally you can't block port 80 and 443 because that's 90% of the internet nowadays. So, very blunt instrument, really.
Indeed,
So yeah, and further than that, if I look at something like BitTorrent, if I can spell it, there we go. So we can pull that up, and we can see that BitTorrent doesn't have a standard port, so it's not just going to be on port 80. If it finds it can't go out on port 80 or 443, it'll keep looking until it finds one that's open. So unless you switch off the internet entirely, you're literally...
we'll all agree the internet's quite useful.
Yes, yes, it has its uses. So basically we can examine traffic, see it's BitTorrent, block it.
Okay.
If we don't want that, or restrict it to certain users or times or what have you. Then, basically, moving on from that, we've got the policies. So this is where we see our what any firewall user would recognise as firewall rules, applied from the top down. This firewall is actually managed by Panorama, so we see these rules highlighted in yellow. Okay. They are actually centrally managed by Panorama and pushed out to our files. So they're a basic set of...
Is it worth touching just very quick on what Panorama is then?
Absolutely, yes. So Panorama is a management platform where you can control multiple different firewalls, and you could have a standard set of policies. So for every site, we would want to, maybe we might have a ban list of IP addresses or known malware IPs or websites or whatever, and we just block access to and from those as a standard course without having to manually do that at every site.
So if you've got dozens, tens, hundreds of sites, it's a single place just to make those changes and push out everything. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. And then say we can apply applications, groups based on zone. You know, the rules are based on a top-down basis, and the most specific match immediately blocks or allows based on those rules there. And so in addition to the application where we can actually filter on port as well, so you could force it to be an application on a certain port. If it tries to go on a non-standard port, we could prevent that.
Okay, interesting.
Similarly, NAT policies are very similar. I think I'm probably talking to an audience that knows about NAT and how to configure it, but we can say incoming, inbound and outbound NAT, all that is done on a rule basis, top down, as for any other firewall. Where the Palo Alto really shines, though, I think, is in the ability to look at the logs. So if we take an example of the threat logs here, so as you can see, there are traffic logs, threat logs, URL filtering, WildFire submissions, and so on. So if we filter, there's a Boolean search. So it's if there's like an and or include kind of things. So here I filtered for anything from the untrust zone and greater than equal to medium threat level, just to filter out all the information and so on. And we can see these various attempts to attack us, I would suggest. So we're getting a vulnerability identified as a Netgear DGN device remote command execution vulnerability, and that's being blocked by the firewall as a critical vulnerability. As an example of how we can see that there are maybe a particular IP that's constantly attacking. So we can actually click on that. It'll add to the rule set to the query at the top. Filter on that, and we can see everything that's coming from that IP.
Understood. Yeah.
And we can see it's just going to a single IP address in this case, but sometimes you find that it scans through. They scan through multiple of our WAN IPs, or they try lots of different types of attack. It's an ongoing thing.
Yeah.
But it's we can set up policies as well. So if you get above a certain level of malicious traffic, we can set up profiles so that IP can be added to an actual block list, which will last for half an hour or an hour or something, which will really reduce the ability for them to try and do brute force attacks. It's that kind of work. Then we've got the Application Command Center, ACC, where we can really dig into what's going on in the network. So if I just clear all the filters here, we'll be able to see this is showing the last hour. It takes it a moment to populate. There we go. So we can see all the applications on a kind of one of these patchwork quilts kind of views. But we can see the amount of traffic from users. So we can see which user has had the most traffic go to and fro. So we can see this slightly dodgy user here, Ben Randall. If I can add that to a filter, and then I can see the traffic that's come from me.
You sure want to do this now while we're recording?
Well, and we could literally look and we can see, look, there's Vimeo, which basically I'm recording this on Vimeo right now, so I can filter on that, and we could then look and see where that traffic actually goes, so we can actually see the destination IP and see actually that's actually going to the United States.
But I guess same sort of application, you can look at where you might be losing data from a network. You can see, as I know we have seen previously, that a certain PC might be sending lots of data to China, for instance. That sort of stuff shows itself up, right? Yeah,
exactly. And likewise, we can see in the other direction, we could see, look, we're getting a lot of incoming traffic from Russia, from China, without naming any names. But, that's that kind of thing. It gives you a lot more visibility. Yeah. It's very quick and easy. We're looking at just the last hour here, but, we can select a much larger, last 30 days, for example, and have a much greater idea of the pattern of behaviour.
So is it worth touching on, just thinking, and feel free to tell me no, but obviously we're looking here, and this is where we'd identify potentially there's something wrong or there's threats. That kind of leads my brain into things like WildFire and how they help address those.
Absolutely. So obviously the next gen firewall itself, it has antivirus capabilities. That will be signature based. But what Palo Alto came up with quite a few years ago now actually is a product called WildFire, where if it sees an unknown file, so an executable, a PDF, that sort of thing, which is doesn't match. It's a unique thing it hasn't seen before.
Yeah.
Doesn't match any signatures. It will then send that up to Palo Alto, where they've got a series of virtual machine, like sandbox environments, and they'll basically open that file in that VM and look at the behaviour.
Okay.
So does it immediately try and phone home to a command and control system or whatever?
Just trash everything.
Yeah, exactly. That kind of behaviour,
Yeah.
and then it will come back with a verdict. And those updates, that update will be then sent back to your Palo Alto, but also added to the overall database. So anybody who's got a WildFire subscription, even if they're not sending those items out, they're getting the benefit of all the other thousands of people.
Am I right in thinking that's something like it's within 6 minutes or something crazy?
Yeah, you can get updates every 5 minutes from WildFire. So rather than your normal AV sort of daily updates or something like that, you're
24 hours behind.
Yes, exactly.
Stuff,
always on the back foot. But this helps to bring that, keep you right up to the minute, literally.
And I guess on that similar vein, and I don't know if we can show it in this console or not, but I'm just thinking of WildFire, obviously that kind of 6 minute protection window. Within the Palo Alto kind of the ecosystem of products, you've obviously got the Cortex XDR.
Yes.
So the kind of client protection as well, which I also believe uses WildFire.
Absolutely, yeah. The Cortex XDR, previously known as Traps, also takes use of WildFire. Makes use of WildFire. Cortex XDR is based on exploits. So rather than a signature-based detection of malware, where again you have to stay up to date. If somebody's written something yesterday, you won't know about it, or today even, then it won't know about it. But if the actual exploits that those pieces of malware are using are much less frequently discovered.
Yeah.
So it looks for a piece of software making use of that known exploit, or even a behavioural change. So unusual behaviour will get flagged up. There's AI behind that whole system, and so that can identify that unusual behaviour and block activity based on that.
And will it do the same thing? I guess report up to WildFire, work out that it's wrong, report back to.
Absolutely, yeah. It makes use of WildFire as part of its unrecognised file. It will send up to WildFire and do the explode the file and find out what's going on there.
Fantastic. When you think about the problems, and we've obviously talked this podcast before about ransomware and all this sort of stuff, and antivirus now, again, my opinion, I'll caveat that, a little bit behind the times, because you are always on the back foot. You're at best maybe 12 or 24 hours away from a solution, but with things like the Palo Alto Firewalls and WildFire and Cortex XDR, you are stopping it at the source.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so the firewall is kind of the perimeter defence, but you do need that endpoint protection as well, because there's also the attack from within.
Yeah.
And via social engineering, people can have otherwise legitimate access to a machine, or apparently legitimate access, without actually sending something through. So you need to consider all the options on that, really.
Absolutely. Okay. Is there anything else on the console we can go through you think is interesting?
I think those are the main things. There's beyond that, we're looking at licensing setup and so on. I mean, I can quickly show the dynamic updates, for example. So there's a schedule, which is the updates to the vulnerability, antivirus, application and threat databases. So as new applications are made available, that database which I showed earlier is not static. That's obviously people are coming up with new things all the time. And so those updates come in every day. And yes, you can see we've actually got WildFire set up to download every 15 minutes here, which in our experience has found to be fine, but that interval has gone down as people's bandwidth has increased, because it's a download. So a place which had a small amount of bandwidth, that could be a problem if you're constantly doing that.
Comms has become cheaper and cheaper and enable us to do this. So again, just thinking out loud, we're obviously looking at, we said OS 9.1.
Yes.
They've released 10.1.
Yes.
Are you able to show us, as I understand it, again, correct me if I'm wrong, it's not a huge amount of difference functionally?
No, well, I think that the bottom line, there are new functions which have been made available, but overall, the functionality, which for 99% of use cases really is satisfied by 9.1, and we find it to be a little bit quicker on some of the older firewalls.
9.1's quicker.
You know, as with everything in IT, you get the latest and greatest, and you find it's a little bit slower. You know, but the support for 9.1 is continuing until 2023, I believe.
Fine, so loads of time.
Yeah, exactly. Obviously, there are still updates in terms of security and bug fixes, that sort of thing. But we're actually on 10.1 is the major branch that's been released now. So they do like 10.0, 10.1.
Yeah.
There'll be 11.0 and so on. But things like SD-WAN were released as a new feature was released in version 10. So that's a feature that you need to upgrade to. But if you're not using that, obviously it's
licensable or inclusive?
That is licensable. That's a licensable feature,
but nice to have, I guess, because obviously SD-WAN has exploded, and having multiple different boxes to manage that, when actually you can consolidate that into a single appliance, is, I guess, a commercial advantage.
Yes, absolutely. If you've got a use case for SD-WAN, then absolutely you can have you do a lot with that for sure.
Okay. Excellent. So I guess wrapping up, the key USPs in your mind. Obviously, we're big fans of Palo Alto. Yeah. If I can do the bloody podcast thing of give me three reasons why you should buy Palo Alto. In your opinion, as an SME for Palo Alto, what are the three key things that you really like about the technology or sets it apart?
Right. For me, obviously, it's the app ID, the ability, the granularity, the layer 7 firewalling. So we're not just on the old legacy layer 4 firewalling. Then we've got the ease of use of the interface, really, and following into that really is the visibility, the excellent logging and searching, which I've found that to be unmatched anywhere else where I've worked on firewalls anyway. And I've had die-hard checkpoint users have gone to me and say, why didn't we get a Palo Alto before? And so I have been trying to tell you, but what can we say? I think it's a really nice platform to use, and gives you great visibility. That really is what you want out of a file. You want to see what's going on.
Yeah, and I guess you've got that from my perspective. The advantages I see as a salesperson when I'm talking to a customer, it's really the whole ecosystem that you have with Palo Alto. You've got firewalls, the ability to use WildFire, which I think is excellent, but also controlling the client, controlling Prisma in the cloud, SaaS applications, all that sort of good stuff. With that single vendor approach, where historically you might have had one or two or three different vendors, and as you will know far more than I will, troubleshooting issues can be a problem.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Having a single vendor, having that's one ecosystem when it integrates together, that certainly saves a lot of bother. If there's there's always going to be a problem somewhere. This is IT after all. We have a job, but basically having one vendor, one ecosystem, that certainly really works well.
Brilliant. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you. You're welcome.
And thank you for joining us on this edition of Krome Cast. Check it out. If there's anything you'd like us to discuss on future episodes, please remember to leave that in the comment section below, and do like, subscribe and share, and join us again on the next edition of Krome Cast. Check it out.